Boss fired me for being pregnant. I'm the one who gets paid in the end. Before the story begins, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell so you can listen to more stories. This last year, during COVID, had been a tough year for my family. My husband went from 6 figures supporting our family on his salary alone while we pocketed my entire salary to losing his job for 8 months. I work in political campaigning, which means I work on short-term contracts as an independent contractor. In other words, if we lose an election, I move on to the next race. I made a pretty good name for myself working on the lower levels of a campaign and moving up quickly. In my state this year, there were statewide elections, and I caught a lucky break and ended up the campaign manager on a statewide race. I am the youngest campaign manager at 24 years old to run a statewide race in about the last 20 years. When the primary came up, we lost the election by 200 votes. While we lost the campaign, coming so close to winning, and my age made me kind of a superstar in my field. After we lost, I had offers from all over the state for jobs. The problem is I had just bought a house and wasn't looking to relocate, or the positions weren't high enough coming off being the top dog as the higher positions were already filled. I got an offer to join a local campaign, but the salary was lower than what I was used to. I would, however, be the campaign manager again. However, I learned quickly my boss had a holier-than-thou personality. She made several comments about how real women breastfeed and have natural births. I would later be able to do neither, and it really screwed with my emotional well-being. I don't have time to list all the red flags, but I was literally just waiting until my husband got a job to exit. The campaign hadn't been built out at all. There was no one other than the candidate. I ended up building out our entire team, consultant, fundraising, staff, etc. Luckily, I made a lot of powerful connections in my time. I signed my contract and sent it in with the salary we had agreed on, with the stipulation that if we raised enough money 3 months down the line, my salary would be raised, but could not be lowered at any point. Just a few weeks prior, I had also found out that I was pregnant, and my due date was the week of the election. And just a week after joining the campaign, I was also in a serious car accident. Luckily, my pregnancy was safe, but I herniated a disc in the car accident. And due to my pregnancy, there were very few things that could be done as far as helping my back or pain management. If I did my job right, that shouldn't be an issue, because my job can essentially be handled from home and staff could do the rest. I had the team working in lockstep, and I was proud of the work I was doing, even though only about 10% of my views aligned with the campaign. Then, we hit a snag. The candidate's husband got deployed to a rather dangerous place for a month, and she completely checked out. She stopped fundraising, which means that everything comes to a halt in campaigning. She stopped putting in the legwork to win. We also lost our only lower staff member during this time. We knew she was worried about her husband, so no one on the team tried to push back very hard. Eventually, her husband came back and it was go time. There wasn't a minute to waste and I was back to getting our operation working full speed. One day, she calls me up to tell me how 20 years ago, her first job as a private school teacher was making as much money as I was now. I also live in an expensive DC suburb, not the backwoods where she grew up. I have multiple college degrees, and this job offers no benefits, unlike teaching. Not comparable at all. This is when I realized there might be a problem. A couple weeks later, I told her I would need to take a step back from doing the other staff members' jobs, mostly door knocking, because of my injured back, but that we would hire someone. Unfortunately, due to the lack of fundraising, it made it hard to pay anyone else, and those duties fell on her. Campaign managers do not typically door knock. We had a team meeting with the entire team, and I started pressuring the candidate about all the things she wasn't doing, and there was a legitimate meltdown. She started yelling at me about how I wasn't doing my job, and how my pregnancy wasn't her problem, and how I was the reason everything was failing, and then hung up on the entire team. This is where the malicious compliance comes in. After this, I decided to take a step back from doing all the duties that are typically handled by lower-level staff, and just focused on doing my job duties, which weren't being appreciated. I pretty much went radio silent, and she kept nitpicking at everything. Everyone on the campaign started to grow uneasy, but I told them to just hold out. Well, sure enough, she calls me up and says, "Since you are pregnant and can no longer door knock, you can either work for state minimum wage or you can find a new job." Mind you, she knew my husband had been out of work for 8 months and thought I had no options at this point. But what she didn't know is that my husband had gotten a job offer that exact day. So I stopped her right there and thanked her for the opportunity and told her I would be working my contractually obligated 13-day notice at my current salary and then leaving the campaign. She then began to scream at me about how she wasn't paying me a dime more and started listing off a list of issues she had with the way I was doing my job. I stopped her, thanked her once again, and told her all of my finishing tasks would be completed when I received payment for the last month I worked, as well as payment for the 30-day notice that she was legally required to pay me, whether I continued working or not. I waited a few hours, and she never finalized my termination in writing. So I sent her a termination letter thanking her for the opportunity and once again repeating everything we had discussed on the phone. She sent me a nasty email again, reiterating that I wouldn't be paid for the previous month or 30 days, and listed about 10 things that I had done to be terminated, including that I didn't wear makeup to work every day. I decided to send this email to the rest of the team, and sure enough, everyone quit except for the consultant. In 5 minutes, she lost everyone she had. Then, a friend of mine offered me my dream job working for him. So all in all, it worked out in my favor within 5 minutes of being fired. Well, here's where things get tricky. I realized that my contract that obligates her to pay me for the 30 days notice isn't signed, and I'm screwed. Well, sure enough, in her fit of rage, she starts emailing everyone, talking badly about me. The only problem is I still have access to the campaign email, and I'm seeing every email. She was sending emails saying that she wanted to keep me on staff, but that I needed to take less money, and that I shouldn't have been dishonest about my pregnancy. So clearly, I wasn't doing my job that badly. She just wanted to pay a pregnant woman less. She also asked the consultant for a list of things that I did wrong in the campaign so that she would have cause not to pay me my contract. I noticed that the consultant never replied to this email. He told her that if she wanted to fight it, to send him a copy of the contract, and he would have a lawyer take a look at it. Well, sure enough, she sent him a signed copy of the contract, and once again, my contract was valid, and she now had to pay me my severance. She had given me every piece of ammunition I needed to get paid at this point, as well as wage a discrimination suit for referencing my pregnancy as a reason for termination. I hire a lawyer. She continues to pester me about turning over all my work. The thing is, since I'm an independent contractor, I only owe her a final product if I get paid. I reiterate that she isn't getting anything until I've been paid, and she can take it up with my lawyer. She begins slandering me to everyone I know and continuing to send emails about me that I'm just collecting. She then starts calling every friend she has to bully me into giving her what she wants. My response to all of them is, talk to my lawyer. In one final-ditch effort, she has the consultant call me begging me to turn over the stuff. The problem is that the consultant and I are personal friends, and he's really unhappy working for her, but has contractual obligations. I tell him to tell her the same thing. Talk to my lawyer. 5 minutes later, I get a call back from him saying that she has fired him because he refused to throw me under the bus and make up excuses for my termination when he believes I was wrongfully terminated. She fires him too, and now he's out of his obligations. He also tells me that the lawyer she sent the contract over to said to pay me. In a matter of 2 weeks, she is once again at square one with no one on her side. She is out of money and struggling. She finally emails me at 11 p.m. that she is willing to pay me. It's nighttime, and I don't work for her anymore, so I decide I don't need to respond at that moment. Well, she starts calling me incessantly and texting me, all of which I'm ignoring. By the time I wake up in the morning, I have 20 texts and 5 missed calls. I tell her that I will need to talk to my lawyer at this point, and I'll get back to her after he responds. Well, she went nuclear. 20 minutes later, I got a call from the police. She was claiming I had been embezzling campaign funds and stealing her data. I had to get my lawyer on the phone and explain the whole situation and why this was a BS claim. I offered the bank account information for the funds she claims I stole, and it proved that they were sitting right there in her account. She just didn't know how to access them because I'm usually the one who does that. The police officer thought she was nuts at this point, because she was, but then informed her that it was considered larceny to withhold my pay, and asked me if I would like to press charges. I said, if she refused to pay, then yes. Within 2 days, I received a check in the mail with my payment, and I turned everything over. The funny thing is that my 30-day notice pay was actually more money than if I had finished out the contract with the reduced pay she wanted to pay me. I got an extra $700 and didn't have to work for her for the remainder of the time. She ended up losing her election in a swing district by 15 points. I'm sorry you went through that. but I'm glad it worked out for you in the end. You seem like a very smart person and good at your job, so I would think you'll have no problem finding something else. This just shows how important it is for people to know their laws when it comes to working and getting paid. There are many people out there who try to take advantage of others by underpaying or cutting contracts early without paying the full amount owed. I hope you and your husband manage to get back on track nicely now that you both have new jobs. I'm glad, but not surprised, that the woman who tried to exploit you lost her election. She is the last person who deserves it. Don't leave until the bathroom is spotless. You got it, boss. During my time of working at a grocery store, I went through multiple managers. Some were good, and I got along with them, and others not so much. The manager of this story wasn't the worst I've had, but I can definitely say she was the most annoying to deal with. She was one of those types that went, I don't know your duties all that well, but I will micromanage you, and you have to do things my way. And got angry if we didn't do things her way, even if her way wasn't the most efficient. Around the time she started as a manager, a new store policy was being implemented about cleaning the small public bathroom in the back of the store every 2 hours. Honestly, I was not against that. As the public bathroom was only a single toilet and sink, a quick mop and spray wouldn't take too long anyway, and cleanliness was made all the more important when COVID first started. Unfortunately, my manager's micromanaging came into play even here. Basically, if the place wasn't clean enough to eat off of, it wasn't clean according to her. Yes, somehow she expected that level of cleanliness every 2 hours, whilst all of us are busy with our own work. It didn't help that occasionally there were doodles and other such on the walls that were hard to get out, if not impossible, with just normal cleaning supplies. I even remember this one time some guy used spray paint to do some graffiti in there. Anyway, one day it's my turn to clean the bathroom. At the time, it was considerably busy due to the lack of cashiers that day. As I was often used as a backup cashier at that point, I didn't have the time to do such a deep clean like my manager wanted at the first 2-hour mark. A bit later, my manager apparently must have saw the bathroom herself, and she decided to pull me away to berate me. She asked me why I haven't cleaned the bathroom yet, and I let her know that I just had not deep cleaned it, as I didn't have time due to there being some customers at the cash register. My manager flipped at this and shouted, "No excuses! You're not a full-on cashier anyway! Now go back and clean it again, and do it right this time! I want it to be spotless! Don't leave until you're done!" I calmly responded, "Aye, ma'am," and made my way to the bathroom. And now it's finally time for the malicious compliance. As mentioned earlier, sometimes there were things on the walls that just would not come out with the cleaning materials we had on hand. Hence why we usually had a cleaning company do such deep cleaning at night. This naturally resulted in me not being able to leave, as I had no way of cleaning these things myself. So I just did my best to clean what I could, and then just sat on the toilet doing stuff on my phone. I had nothing else to do after all, and nowhere I could go. Of course, I wasn't mean-spirited enough to make the customers' bladders suffer for my compliance, so I did exit the bathroom when somebody needed to use it, but I went back in afterwards. All in all, I didn't do much for the next 5 hours or so. I just got paid for sitting around on my phone and occasionally cleaning. The fallout outside the bathroom, however, was much more eventful. Turns out that a bit after I was sentenced to being in my bathroom jail cell, one of the cashiers ended up clocking out for the day, and another cashier had called out sick. That just left one cashier, and my manager to deal with the horde of customers wanting to check out during one of the busiest days of the week. As expected, I was called over the loudspeaker multiple times to come help, from that manager of all people. But I'm like, you ordered me to stay in here, so I'm staying in here, and didn't respond to those calls. It didn't help that I knew she called because she just didn't want to do any cashier work. Eventually, the other cashier also ended up having to clock out for the day. So when normally me and the one who called out sick would be at the cash registers, my manager had to do this mostly by herself. Unfortunately, I couldn't see this in real time, as I was in the back, but I do hope she had to suffer a bit from angry, rude, and/or entitled customers. I ended up leaving my prison a bit after 8 p.m., which was after she left for the night. I hadn't had my lunch break after all, and I actually felt like helping after she was gone. During my next shift with her in charge, I got pulled into the office by her and sat down with another manager, I suppose as a witness or something. I was being questioned about where I was on that day and why I hadn't responded to any of the calls. I simply answered by saying I was simply following her orders. She acted like she had no idea what I was on about, so I reminded her about the demand of making the bathroom spotless. I reminded her that I did tell her there was stuff I couldn't clean with the supplies on hand, but she insisted. Then I dropped a lie. saying that she would fire me if I didn't follow her request, to get the other manager in the room more on my side. But it also had the unattended effect by getting the micromanaging manager to nearly lunge at me, and she started full-on yelling at me. Despite willingly taking part in trying to piss her off with the malicious compliance, I still had some anxiety issues, and they kicked in during this time. That was enough for the other manager to step in and stop this. In the end, I was just told I could go back to my normal duties, and that I didn't have to keep the bathroom that clean. Unfortunately, my micromanaging manager didn't seem to get much more than a slap on the wrist. To be fair, it made sense, as she didn't do much else besides yell at me, and there were no physical altercation. But even then, I managed to have some fun before I left that job by simply watching her frustrated face, knowing that she couldn't micromanage me as much anymore. Well, I guess that is one way to get what you want. What a ridiculous request to deep clean the toilet every 2 hours using store staff. She should have hired a cleaner if spotless is the standard she's looking for. I love the way you handled the situation by simply just listening to what you were asked. And I'm glad it coincidentally turned out to be a busy day in the store to backfire on your manager. You want to fire me in the middle of my shift, but have me stay until the end? Okay, I'll bite. About 15 years ago, when I was about 20, I got a job at a new Panera opening in my town. I worked there exactly 5 days. After 2 days of working the salad line and making sandwiches, I was told I was being moved to the kitchen. I didn't mind, because I love to cook and bake, so I was excited. For about 1 whole minute, when I showed up on my 3rd day, I get walked to the kitchen. I'm so stoked. I stop at the chef line, but the manager keeps walking. I stop at the baker line, but the manager keeps walking. He stops in front of the dishwasher. He says I'm going to be washing dishes for a couple days because they hadn't hired one yet. I give it my do-best attitude for 2.5 days. It's a damn big pill to swallow. I suddenly realized the back end of a bakery restaurant to be much harder than I ever thought. And I've worked in the back prior, just not at this level before. So much props to all of you back-of-the-house workers. I have always worked counters, even maintenance, but never that hard. And I started to fail because I was feeling dejected and being talked down to. Come my 3rd day on dishes, and the last day at Panera, I show up on time, and it was a pretty busy night, so there was lots to get to. I try so hard, but by then we're open, so freshly dirty plate tubs are coming back in groves and start piling up on the counter, then on the floor. Halfway through my shift, my lunch is late. Before I go to lunch, they pull me into the office and tell me they're letting me go. Like this. We're so sorry to say, but we have to let you go. You're just not keeping up. But would you please stay and finish your shift first? I was floored, but I did it. I proceeded to wash 1 pan at a time in the industrial washer we have. More tubs are piling up. My coworker's asking what's going on. I explain, and they understood, and support thankfully. So even more tubs pile up, now on the floor, before I can even finish the pans. Come the end of my shift, I knew my managers were going to have to stay and wash the dishes, but they were courteous enough and told me that as a parting gift and thanks for trying, I could take home whatever I wanted from the store. So I did. Over $120 in fresh breads and pastries of all delicious varieties. I gave most of it away. Heard from a friend like a year later they were pissed about that for a while, but couldn't do anything, which got them more pissed. It wasn't my finest hour, but I don't regret it one bit. Moral of the story, don't fire your employees mid-shift, but ask them to stay, and expect any kind of quality. You must have great patience to stick that shift out, as I would be super pissed. First of all, they force you onto washing when your desire was to cook or bake. Then they fire you in the middle of your shift and have the nerve to ask you to stay. I'm glad you used no energy after all, as they didn't deserve anything from you. The breads and pastries you took are the least you deserve, but at least you took a hefty amount to make it worth it. If you enjoyed these stories, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Check out the other videos on your screen right now. Otherwise, you're definitely the jerk.